Emotions then were more like pictures, like the gleaming sky before me. I could feel the whole of creation, but it was harder to think about it. That was why I wanted to be a writer. I would contemplate all the images and emotions I couldn't express and finally put them into words. What's more, I do a much better job of it than before, than those friends of Mr. Dennis who used to drop by the bookstore.
That was Nobel Prize winning author Orhan Pamuk reading from his latest novel, The Red-Haired Woman. Thank you so much for joining us today. That passage tells us a little more about the protagonist and his sensibility. He's called Cem, and he's a philosophical young man who wants to be a writer. What about you? After all these novels, prizes, many years doing this job, do you still approach it for the same emotional reasons as that young man?
Yes, perhaps. I've been writing novels for the last 40 years. I also developed a craft that I am self-conscious and confident about. So, yes, it's always, for being a writer, is always for me identifying your emotions and founding a correlative, something that represents that in the world. It may be that thing, may be an object or a story or someone's story, but I strongly believe that first we have emotions, feelings that we cannot pin down, we cannot understand, especially when it's Oedipus, your mother, your father, your nation, your country, big myths and ideas, religion. We cannot rationally understand all of this, especially when we are a teenager. Thank God I'm not a teenager anymore, but I can identify my feelings when I was a teenager with more rationality than on those years. That's why I postponed this story of teenage and understanding religion, humanity, fathers, people who dominate us but whom we admire, all this confusion. Then I find a story that represents that. And this is the story of a well-digger and his disciple. And there is authority and the desire to kill or to be free.
Well, this authority, perhaps you're referring to the father figure that seems to haunt the book. You mentioned the tragedy of Oedipus Rex. Why did you want to explore that dynamic of this father figure? Did you have personal reasons?
Yeah, I had this story for quite a long time, and I must confess that seeing that my country is going towards authoritarianism, unfortunately, and free speech just being destroyed because of that, I wanted to explore the subject. Why do some nations, civilizations, put individuality on a pedestal? Why the others put authoritarianism, strong fathers that rule themselves? This is an interesting subject that I was thinking about for many years. But this is not an epic novel. It's a brief novel that is metaphysically or in a literary way discussing these issues.
You're here in Paris participating in the Livre Paris Book Fair, the annual salon here. This year the fair is paying tribute to Europe, the very idea of Europe, with debates, interviews and a focus on the very best literature from the continent. You live on the threshold of Europe, both geographically and maybe ideologically, and you recently published an open letter with other intellectuals and writers saying that Europe itself is in peril. Do you really think the European project is in its death throes?
No. It's not in death throes, but there is some danger. I strongly believe in the idea of Europe, which, in a way, is a French invention, égalité, liberté, fraternité. And that gave us whole women's movement, democracy, free speech, respect for minorities. I believe in these values, and Europe gave these values to humanity, so we should stick to them. These are some bad times are approaching, but these values are so deeply rooted in Europe, and also, believe me, in humanity, by the intellectuals, by people who read their Balzacs or whatever, that they will not be eroded so fast. But we have to be careful to defend them.
Like many of your novels, The Red-Haired Woman takes place in Istanbul and its periphery, and that sprawling city often seems to be a character in your novels. How How has the city shaped you as an artist? How has it made you the writer you are?
I was not a self-conscious Istanbul writer. I just wanted to write about my friends, my life, things that we all know. Then later, as my books were translated to many languages, people told me that I am an Istanbul writer. It was not a self-imposed anxiety. I was just writing about my friends, and it turned out to be I was writing about Istanbul.
Well, it's not only in your prose, you also study the city in your photography.
Yes.
And that work is on show at the Yapı Kredi Cultural Centre in Istanbul. You've chosen a very specific perspective for these images. Can you tell us more about how that came about?
My studio and my balcony overlooks a wonderful panorama of entrance of Istanbul, the old town, the Asian side. I'm on the European side. And I had a great camera. When I was frustrated or could not write my novel, I nervously took photos. And then a great photo publisher, Gerhard Stedel, put them in a book. I'm happy about that. We're going to publish more books because I'm also a photographer and amateur. Now they are being published. I'm very happy about that.
Well, another Turkish writer and a friend of yours who's also enamoured with Istanbul is Elif Shafak, who, unlike you, chooses not to live there all of the time. Now, she recently referred to Turkey as a place where freedom of speech remains but a distant dream. And you experienced that firsthand in 2005 when you were taken to court for saying that 1 million Armenians and 30,000 Kurds were killed in Turkey. That civil case against you for the crime of insulting the Turkish Republic was eventually dropped. That was a while ago now. How do you see the climate now?
Well, after all that, the government gave me a bodyguard. I still have bodyguards. Sometimes, jokingly, I used to say that I used to have 3 bodyguards, and now that it's reduced to 1, Turkey is improving. We are not even improving now. I am not at the center of political fight today. So there are brave journalists who are saying the truth to the government. Some of them are my friends and end up in jail. And the only consolation, if that's a consolation, after they get out of the jail, they call me and say, I've read your books that I haven't read in the jail. Well, I don't know whether to be happy about this or sad about this or laugh about this or have tears about this.
Yeah. Well, beyond artistic freedoms, another writer, Margaret Atwood, said of your work that the Turkish people often reads his novels, your novels, as if taking its own pulse. How do you judge the democratic political health of your country right now?
There is democracy if democracy is only voting. The counting of the votes is fair, but the atmosphere is not fair. It's only propaganda of the government. Now we are heading towards elections. It's not a very optimistic situation, but I know so many people, 50% of the nation does not vote for this government. Isn't this a good sign?
Well, going back to your earlier work, your novel Snow brought your writing to a very widespread attention around the world when it was published in translation in 2004. It is one of the most widely read Turkish books ever. You wrote that at the end of the last century, but it feels very prescient, especially one part of the story, because there's a group of young girls who insist on wearing the Islamic headscarf, and that causes great tension with those people who support secularism. Now, 2 decades later, this debate is still raging in France. Why do you think it's such a heated issue?
Well, the heart of Islam, the problems, if there are, Islam and modernity, is how women dress. This is the essential fight. And also, it's not how women dress, it's women's liberation. So even today, they cannot curtail women's voices. It's the soft point of the ruling, elite. Turkey was changing fast, and Turkey is perhaps among the countries that Muslim countries that the women are most liberated, but there is so much to go, and women are even angrier today in Turkey.
Now, Snow quite plainly predicts a world where religious extremism is pitted against so-called Western values. That's this clash of culture that people often
That's the subject I always
about.
venture. Go. Mm-hmm.
Now, as a novelist, you were able to observe that society and predict certain things, as you did in that book. Did you feel some duty to change what was going to happen?
Good question, in the sense that essentially, primarily, I am writing for its beauty. I had so many friends who went to politics in my youth. I always defended, I am writing not for politics, for beauty. But I'm a Turkish writer. Problems came to me. Journalists like you ask me political questions. And I'm a normal person. You feel guilty if you avoid it. You feel guilty if your friends are in jail and you say, I like the beauty of the flowers. While I actually write for it, of course, I'm a social writer too. You feel the responsibility. When so many people are in jail, you just cannot enjoy life without guilt or what. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, staying with art, we actually asked you for a tip for a piece of artwork that stood out for you recently, and you named a film by Alfonso Cuarón.
Yes. I really loved Alfonso Cuarón's Roma. One reason is that it was so much like my childhood. And also, I like the way that maid or that a woman gave most compassionate. She was the most compassionate person in the family, and I know what it means. And the friendship with the maid, I had them all in my childhood. And what I respected in Cuarón is that he is also autobiographically a figure in the film, but a minor figure. And I like that so much. And it was really well done as craft, a beautiful, beautiful film. Forget about the ideology, autobiography, whatever. It's a beautiful film I recommend to everyone.
Okay, seems like it was a universally successful movie, that one. Orhan Pamuk, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll leave you with a clip of Alfonso Cuarón's Roma. Do remember to check out our website for more arts and culture, and you can keep up with us on social media too. There's more news coming up on France 24 just after this.